The legend of Russdiculous comes full circle as the Louisville men's basketball program will retire Russ Smith's number 2 jersey tomorrow as the Cardinals take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We'll talk about that and more on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Happy Friday. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I want to take this time, as always, to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, including YouTube now, 5 days a week, your team every day. As I mentioned, Russ Smith will have his number 2 jersey retired in the banners forever tomorrow as the Louisville men's basketball team takes on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Will rank the top 3 games in terms of individual performance for Russ during his career at Louisville, spanning from 2011 to 2014. We'll then transition into the number 4 ranked Louisville women's basketball team's loss to NC State on the road in that heartbreaking collapse. We'll analyze that matchup and come away with some takeaways. And then finally, in the final segment, we will go back to what happened on Wednesday night. The men's basketball team snapped the 3-game losing skid with a win over Boston College. We'll talk takeaways from that as well. So before we get into the content of today's show, like I mentioned, for those who are not aware of who I am, my name is Dalton Pence. I'm a credentialed media member for Cardinal Sports Zone, where I serve as both a football beat writer and a recruiting analyst. Also do some PA announce work for the university in various sports. You can check out my personal Twitter in the graphic in the bottom left hand of your screen, and the podcast Twitter page is at @LO_Louisville. So let's get right on into it. Number 2, Russdiculous. The legend is coming full circle. We saw what happened on the court. Now he will forever be remembered in the rafters of the KFC Yum Center. Russ Smith getting his number retired tomorrow against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Just a couple quick statistics throughout the history books for Russ. He's has the 5th most career points with just under 2,000. Most in program history in terms of steals with 257. Obviously, he's a national champion. He's been to 2 Final Fours, 3 Sweet 16s, and is a 2-time All-American, including a first-team All-American selection in 2014. One of the players to where when he was playing, I think that a lot of people at times not necessarily got tired of Russ, because we definitely didn't, but kind of got frustrated with him just because I feel like sometimes he tried to jump the gun a little bit too much, shot selection, etc. But at the end of the day, nobody can take away from the fact that his impact for this team and for this program was tremendous. He will go down, as a top 5 player in program history. Very glad to have been able to witness him in the quote-unquote golden era of Cardinal basketball. But I want to rank the top 3 games for Russ in terms of individual performances. Coming in at number 3, we will start out in his breakout sophomore season. Now, I don't know for you all what game kind of got him on the map, because that year, he scored, I think, 24 points against, was it Memphis? I think it was Memphis, and then he followed that up with a 23-point game against I think it was the Western Kentucky. But for me, the 3rd best game of his career comes against the eventual national champion Kentucky Wildcats. A 30-point performance against the Wildcats back on New Year's Eve back in 2011. Unfortunately, the Cards ended up losing that game. However, he shot 50% from the field. He was 10 for 20, shot just under 40% from deep. Had 5 rebounds to go with that, 3 assists. But like I said, 30 points for Russ Smith in this one. I felt like, this was one of those for me where I was like, I'd seen Russ play the first year, and I was like, I don't know how good this guy's going to be. But when that game, the game against Kentucky came his sophomore year, I was like, hold on now, wait a minute, we might have something here. And, I thought, he shot the ball really, really well, was extremely efficient. Like I mentioned, shooting 50% from the field is nice, especially on high volume. But I think that this kind of started, maybe not necessarily started, but kind of gave, presented the momentum for him to be, a secondary scoring option on this team, because this team really kind of didn't have a true number one scorer. I mean, they had Siva, Kyle Kuric, Chris Smith, Gorgie Zhang, Russ Smith. So I think that this was the game that we kind of saw him start to blossom into this soon-to-be superstar. I don't think really anybody maybe they didn't see what came in 2012-13 season, but definitely so. We saw him turn into a completely different player from what he was his freshman year, which, I'm very glad, for this game. Although it was a loss, I remember telling a buddy who was a Kentucky fan, I was like, man, I got to look more into this guy, because I'm telling you, I didn't know that he had this in him, despite watching him do what he did against Western Kentucky, do what he did against Memphis, but just having that big game against Kentucky for me was number 3 on the docket. In 2012 and 13, he had a handful of 30-point performances. Most notably, he had a 36-point I'm sorry, that's not the right one. We'll talk about that here in a second. I was looking at the wrong one. I was talking about the 36-point performance in a loss against UNC his senior season. But in his junior season, which was a very balanced Louisville team, he did still have a couple 30-point outings, most notably the one coming against Kansas City early on in that December non-conference slate. Very solid throughout, like I mentioned. It was an All-American season for him. Most people will talk about, he didn't necessarily live up to the potential in which he could have in the Final Four. Only had 9 points against Michigan, had 21 against Wichita State, but shot 6 for 17 from the field. But he did not have a bad tournament. We have to get that out of our heads that he had a bad tournament, because he did not. Because number 2 on this ranking is the Sweet 16 game against the Oregon Ducks. This was a game to where Louisville started out pretty solid, and then toward the end, the Ducks made things interesting. He had 31 points against Oregon, 8 for 12 from two-point land, only 1 for 4 from deep, but shot the ball 9 for 16, 12 for 14 on free throws. He had 3 assists, only 3 rebounds as well. But ultimately, for me, this was a huge game for his performance, because the usual guys didn't necessarily play all that well. When Oregon started to chip away, started to come back, so to speak, it was Russ that kind of steadied the ship and made sure Louisville, went on to the Elite Eight round. But ultimately, I felt like, on a big stage up in Indianapolis in the Sweet 16, Russ scores 31 points, regardless if he got, a good amount of that from the free throw line. He still took care of business, even when, necessarily he didn't shoot the ball all that well from the field. He still played pretty solid and, stepped up for Louisville. Many times of him stepping up, this kind of epitomizes him doing so. But number 1, take a guess, because there's a couple of them. I went back and forth. I got to be honest. Like I said, I went back to that 36-point game against North Carolina that he had early on in his senior season. I mean, he had a handful of 30-point games, especially in his senior season alone. Hofstra, he scored 30 points. Overall throughout, that last season of his, he was a first-team All-American. But in my opinion, the only game in which he eclipsed the 40-point threshold is the best game of his career. That came against Houston in the American Athletic Conference tournament, in which Louisville went, guns a-blazing into and absolutely throttled the competition. I mean, it was incredible to see what they did. When you look at that 42-point game performance, he had three assists, 3 rebounds. But this was one of those to where, he shot the ball 14 for 22 from the field, so he was crazy efficient, 9 for 10 from the free throw line. It's crazy, because you would think with the way that, he being the microwave scorer that he is, you would think he would be able to cross that 40-point threshold. But regardless, he did against Houston in a sense where, none of the games were close in the AAC tournament. They beat Rutgers by 50 points or something like that. They beat Houston by a good margin, and then boat raced UConn and company in the conference tournament final. But overall, that's the best performance from him. But there's so many more that you can go to. I really wanted to make the Cincinnati performance the one to go to, but he only had 10 points in that one. He didn't shoot the ball all that well. It's just kind of, look past because of that game winner. But Very, very thankful for Russ during his career here. One of the most electric players that I've seen in college basketball with me watching. Gonna obviously, I say gonna miss him. I still do miss him. He's been around the community. He's going to get his chance in the NBA this season. Mark my words. I've tweeted it out before, and I mean it truly now, as he is going to definitely play in the NBA once, a couple of times this season. So, transitioning over into the women's basketball aspect of things, we'll talk about the loss against NC State that happened last night. After we talk about our friends at NetSuite, not NetOnline, BetOnline and NetSuite combined, wouldn't that be something? But I want you to imagine a scenario. This is it. The putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you're running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software. To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. It's the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth and everything you need to grow all in one place. With NetSuite, you can automate your processes and close your books in no time while staying well ahead of the competition. Over 28,000 businesses already use NetSuite. For the new year, NetSuite has a new financing program for those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/locked. Head to netsuite.com/locked for this special one-of-a-kind financing offer on the #1 financial system for growing businesses, netsuite.com/locked. All right, transitioning over into the #3 Louisville women's basketball loss to the #4 ranked NC State Wolfpack, and I'm going to be honest. I'm going to lay it right on the table. There's no way to spin it. This is a heartbreaking loss. Having a double-digit lead going into the fourth quarter and losing by almost double digits. I think the Wolfpack outscored the Cardinals 31-8 in the fourth quarter. It's tough to swallow. There's not a ton of positives to spin from that fourth quarter, but I'll break it down the best way that I can. Let's call a spade a spade. I think that the Cards struggled with the NC State Wolfpack's press. I think that the press really caused some unwarranted turnovers, and that allowed NC State, who was shooting the ball extremely well in that fourth quarter, the best three-point shooting team statistically coming into this game. Louisville had kind of held in check, but Diamond Johnson, Jakia Brown-Turner, they kind of got going, and Alyssa Cunane got what she was going for inside. So it was one of those things to where NC State kind of caught fire in the last quarter, but Louisville wasn't really able to get anything going until the last 3 to 4 minutes, and by that point, you can't score 8 points in the final quarter and really expect to win against a top 5 squad. So I look forward to seeing how Jeff Walls and company respond and work with improving their offense against the press and, getting out of those situations. But ultimately, I felt like, we saw a good, the first 3 quarters was incredible. I loved what I saw in terms of moving without the ball. The offensive sets were genius. I love, the pick and roll action, but getting the ball into the hands of the big, kind of right inside the 3-point line, close to the elbow, and allowing them to play with their back to the basket, and trusting them to make the decision on having guards set screens for each other. There's been instances where Haley Van Lith set a screen for Kiana Smith, in which she broke to the basket and got a layup from Liz Dixon. I like that. That's some of the best offense that I've seen from this team all year. Emily Ingsler, what is there to say about her that already hasn't been said? She's a top 3 to 5 defender in college basketball. Just her on-ball defense, active hands, overall grasp of what's happening on the court, the ability to hedge the opposing ball handler and recover in pick-and-roll situations, and see her switch ability is incredible, being able to defy, being a premier shot blocker, but also quick enough laterally to stay in front of opposing guards. That's such a luxury to have in the defense. She didn't necessarily shoot all that well. 6 for 18 from the field, had 15 points, but 11 rebounds to go with 2 steals. I thought she did very well in terms of boxing out Alyssa Cunane and just taking away second chance opportunities from the Wolfpack. But ultimately, Kiana Smith had 8 points. Liz Dixon didn't score, played 11 minutes, but I loved what I saw from her. Olivia Cochran, this may have been the best that I've ever seen her play in a Louisville uniform. And that's no disrespect to what she did last year or some things that she's done this year, but I felt like this is like me having seen the next level from her and her taking her game to the next, to the next step, because with the way that she played against that, that big front court was incredible. 19 points, led the team in scoring, 7 rebounds to go with 1 block. I thought she played very smart, had a couple instances, a ball bounced off her shoe and stuff like that. But ultimately, I was extremely pleased with her. Loved what I saw from her. Van Lith as well had some instances. She was 6 for 17, which kind of surprised me because it seems like more shots went in than not. But 13 points, 4 assists. She's shooting the ball a lot better than she did early on in the season. She's going to continue to bud into the player that the Louisville fans are looking forward to. Alana Smith went over 5 from the field today. Mikasa Robinson had some good plays outside that you don't see on the box score. But ultimately, I think that the team's lack of a number one scorer hurt them in the fourth quarter when they needed a bucket. You miss players like Dana Evans and Asia Durr, because you don't have there wasn't a player tonight to go out to kind of reverse the momentum and put a stop to the run. And obviously, it doesn't help. A lot of these possessions weren't even shots, unfortunately, because of the turnovers, trying to break the press. But even when they did get into the half court, some ill-advised shots, rushed into shots. I'm not saying that the lack of a number one scorer caused them not to win this game, but I think it kind of aided to it. But I like what I see from this committee-based approach, and I think that it can work. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm not going to take away from what I've been saying all year, is that it could definitely work, but you have to have those pieces step up. Look, I'll be honest. Does this loss hurt? Yeah. I mean, it's probably up there with 2019, the Duke loss for men's basketball. Maybe hurts a little more considering the circumstances. But it's all about, I sent a tweet. I said, look, the only thing that matters now is how you respond when you get knocked down. You can either, stay down and allow when it rains it pours, or you can get up and dust yourself off and get back into one thing that I'll say, if you can remember 2018, right? Louisville hosts Notre Dame kind of early in the conference slate and absolutely demolishes them, right? And the Cards ended up beating Notre Dame in the conference championship as well. But guess what? Notre Dame went on to play very, very well in the NCAA tournament, and they won it all. So I think that my message here is, yes, is it a loss that it's kind of hard to justify because of the way it happened? I mean, sure, yeah. I mean, it's like I said at the beginning, it is very, very tough to dissect. But at the end of the day, there are some positives to take away from this performance. I think when the teams meet again in the conference championship, which I'm predicting, I think it could be a different outcome. And I think that if the shots are falling, it's a different story for Louisville. But overall, don't give up on this team. Don't give up on Jeff Walz and the coaching staff, because if there's one coach in women's basketball that's able to make some adjustments, it is our head coach. So, I'm very interested to see how the team looks against I think it's Wake Forest on Sunday when they host the Demon Deacons. Hope there's no, being lethargic or anything. It's all a matter of responding. There's no shortness of getting these girls hyped up and ready to play from this coaching staff's perspective. So ultimately, hard loss to swallow, but at the end of the day, the season is not over whatsoever. There's still, a month and some change to go for this team to get better and better, and they'll be back into the hunt of things, and we just had to take it a game at a time. So looking forward to that. I want to take this time now to focus on the men's basketball, getting back in the win column against the Boston College Eagles. We'll talk about that here in a second after we talk about BetOnline. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. It remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. With the new year and a new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today, you can receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit by using the promo code LOCKEDON. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the year. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports, and BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, so transitioning into the final segment of the day, the Louisville men's basketball team back in the win column after a 3-game ACC losing skid. with a 67-54 victory over the Boston College Eagles back 2 nights ago on Wednesday. The Cardinals in this game, I thought that there was some more energy that we had kind of been looking for. The effort was there. I liked the fact that Jae'Lyn Withers probably had his best outing of the season. He played 22 minutes, had 10 points, 5 rebounds. Definitely liked what I saw from him. Sidney Curry, 13-7. He was a player coming into it who I thought, he was probably going to be a role player, but he's kind of quickly turning into Louisville's go-to guy on offense. And I love what I see from Mason Faulkner as well. Faulkner only had 8 points, but, 7 assists, the point guard that Louisville has been kind of yearning for. And I think that this kind of means as Faulkner's minutes increase, we may start to see guys like Jared West's minutes decrease. The starting lineup of Sidney Curry, Malik Williams, L. Ellis, Noah Locke, Mason Faulkner kind of seems like the lineup that you will go to. Matt Cross has shown, the ability to make big-time hustle plays, but until he really shows that, he can be the shooter that he was rumored to be coming in, it's kind of hard to see him being that other starter. He had 5 points on Wednesday, played 16 minutes, shot 1 for 3 from the field, 0 for 1 from three-point distance. Dre Davis was out in this game with a late scratch due to an ankle, rolling his ankle, kind of like in the fashion that Sidney Curry did right ahead of the Pittsburgh game. Sam Williamson had 7 points, 4 boards, 2 steals. I thought executed his role very well. Overall, Cards didn't necessarily shoot all that great from 3, 33%, but Boston College went 4 for 20 from behind the arc. Mekhi Ashton-Langford led the way for the Eagles with 22 points. TJ Bickerstaff had 12, and Post had 11. So they had 3 players score over 10 points. And get this, none of the other ones scored over 4. There were 4 other players that scored. None scored over 4. So Boston College, they're 7-9. Look, here's what I'll say about this win. It's just that. It's a win. Would you rather have a win than a loss? Well, of course you would. But like I said, the fact that you lost the 3 games preceding this, let's be honest. You're probably sitting squarely on the outside looking in out of the field. I think that the road to get to the NCAA tournament is going to be a difficult one. I mean, obviously you could win the ACC conference tournament, but even then it's a challenging thing to do. But for Louisville, I think that really you almost have to win out January and lose probably less than 3 games between February and March. So you'll enter the conference schedule with 10 losses, and I think you can't have more than 11 to be even in consideration. Even if you were to complete what I just said, there's still caution to believe that you still might not make it due to the lack of quality wins. But the Cardinals will turn their attention to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The Irish, if you remember, defeated the Kentucky Wildcats earlier this season in South Bend. Kind of looking ahead, the Fighting Irish, very similar to the Cardinals in a sense. Points per game, field goal percentage, very comparable. Louisville out-rebounds Notre Dame on average by about 5. Assists are pretty much the same, etc. So they're kind of maybe not necessarily a carbon copy of each other, but very, very close. Louisville's 11-7, 5-3 in the conference. Notre Dame 11-6, 4-2. Dane Goodwin, the leader for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, a player that has kind of torn the Louisville up at times, especially in 2020. So I think that on the day that Russ Smith gets his number retired at the university, I think that I want to see a guy like Noah Locke or even one of these players start to kind of turn the corner and start to be that scoring option that they were kind of rumored to be coming in. I'm interested to see how Sidney Curry does. It seems like the past 2 games he's played, Pittsburgh 17-10, 13-7 against Boston College. So ultimately a great. Excuse me. I knew I had to sneeze. You can kind of feel a sneeze coming on, and it's kind of the worst feeling because you're sitting there like, okay, do I continue talking or do I kind of wait for it to pass? And then it's like, boom, well, damn. But overall, Boston College, it's a win. I'm not into it. I'm not even going to say that it's one of those things that kind of changes my mind because at this point, it's obvious that my expectations kind of haven't been met. Let's just be honest. Hopefully, this team can turn it around. I would, I'll definitely obviously be cheering them on. Hopefully, they're able to get some confidence going into the latter half of this month. I think the last half of the month or the last week of the month, last full week of the month is this week or the next week coming up. But Notre Dame, the next team on the schedule that Louisville will look to try to get a winning streak going of their own. So that's basically going to be it for this week of content. I appreciate everyone for tuning in this week. A couple quick shots before we go. The Cardinal Sports Zone podcast, the most recent one, passed 1 million listens. Be able to check that out at cardinalsportszone.com. Also, the Locked On Bets podcast hosted by your boy Q with handicapping expert analysis from Lee Sterling. You can get that on the Odyssey app or wherever you like to get your podcast. Basically, that's going to wrap up this Friday edition of the show. Be sure to check out, subscribe to the YouTube channel now. About 40 episodes have been posted on the YouTube, so go check that out. And also any share, listen, like, subscribe, rating on any podcast platform, listening platform, etc. Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, etc. It's all appreciated, and I can't say thank you enough and how grateful that I am. But that's going to wrap up this Friday edition of the show. Everyone have a great weekend. Go Cards! And we will see you right back here to recap the weekend's action on Monday.